What is this, Finance Committee, right?
Yes,
Okay. Is Richard joining us?
he's in the council chambers.
Is the mayor in the council chambers as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So is Councilor Kelly and Councilor Brody. Mike, can you tell the mayor the camera he picked is the one that doesn't show the podium? The audio is muted also in the council chambers.
Okay, that fixes that one. But I don't know how to switch the camera for you, Beth, on Zoom.
All right, I guess we could move the podium. Well, I can come in and move the podium after we start the meeting.
Okay. So I guess we're ready to go, huh?
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, that's affirmative. Okay, let's call to order this meeting of the Finance Committee. And Beth, I would ask you to call the roll, please.
Councilor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Moore,
Here.
Mayor Reed,
Here.
Councilor Gibbs,
Here.
Councilor McFarland, Councilor Moore, I'm sorry, Councilor Barbell,
Here.
and Councilor Brody.
Here.
Give me just a minute. I want to make sure I have the latest agenda here in front of me.
It was the one from yesterday. Do you want me to print it out?
No, that's okay, Beth.
Okay.
I got it. Give me just a second, okay?
You see that, the person?
I think so. Thank you. Good idea.
One more second. Okay, here we go. Okay. This is the section of the agenda where we have reports from department representatives and discussions with councilors. And so far, we haven't asked Mr. Marks to provide us any reports. So I believe I will use this time to do my weekly finance update. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, so I'll scroll up to the top of this presentation, perhaps. Okay, today is our 5/21 weekly budget update. I don't know why, but my okay. Today's agenda is this week's frequently asked questions, our latest budget projections, some money saving ideas, and then our 5-year plan. As always, I like to start with the city council's budget assumptions. You know what they are, so I won't read them. Some considerations about the budget assumptions in the age of the pandemic. Cost and value, what is essential? We talked about that last week. Structural balance, we need to keep at least 1.5 million in our rainy day fund. Our unassigned fund balance growth is on hold for 2020, we expect. And sustainability, we will get back on track with sustainable budgets. Just like to add why this is important. It's important for our long-term planning, specifically our 5-year plan, which advises the mayor's annual budget and sets the tone for city operations going forward. Here's a frequently asked question that Elizabeth brought to us last week, so I wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. The city is facing a much larger shortfall than anticipated, maybe 7 million. Well, today the answer to that question is no. We're not anticipating a $7 million shortfall. The shortfalls we've been reporting each week are accurate, we believe, at least as of now. That's not to say that conditions won't worsen for 2021. We should be worried about what will happen to pension contributions, sales tax, and state aid. And as you know, we've been reviewing sales tax and state aid projections each and every week. One thing we can do is all advocate for additional federal aid. Apparently there are a couple of bills in Congress right now that would provide relief to cities our size. So that could be a very good thing for us. And we can also take comfort in the fact that this year's property tax collections were very good. Another thing we can take comfort in is that healthcare expenses are down for the year. So that's a good thing also. Another frequently asked question is why are property assessments going up now when we can least afford it? So we're having a hard time understanding why the county legislature didn't call a halt to reassessment this year. This would have been a really good year to do it, as you know. So I would recommend to our citizens that they go to Grievance Day, May 26th, 4 to 8 p.m. From what I understand, the assessor's office has set up protocols to allow for people to come and speak, take turns, and it'll work very well. The city, for its part, wants to respond to increased assessments with another tax decrease in 2021. So another frequently asked question is, why aren't you opening the beach? So this is our latest statement about the beach. As you can see, we've considered all the factors such as border closing, lack of lifeguards, inability to staff the beach affordably. But we do leave the possibility there for further discussions. And I believe that Patrick McFarland and Ira Barbell today agreed to work on this together in sort of an ad hoc committee. And I think that's a wonderful thing that you guys are doing.
Yeah, Mike, and it's my understanding that at least since I've been on the council, that the beach generally doesn't open before June 21st. That's usually when the safety plan we get from the state allows for opening. Am I correct in that?
I think you're pretty much right. It may have opened earlier in 1 or 2 years, but it usually opens, near the end of school. So
That's about right, Mike.
so,
Third week of June.
okay. Did you bring that up for any particular reason, Patrick?
I just saw you had there that it's the beach will be closed until at least June 21st, but that that's not I guess that's not uncommon.
Well, when I made this slide, which was this morning, the border is closed. The Canadian border is closed until at least June 21st. And there's some talk of extending that. So that's what that refers to. So we'll have to watch that closely.
We should distinguish too about the use of the beach for swimming and the use of that area as park. People have used that as parkland even when the beach is closed for swimming in the fall, winter, and spring. And presumably that's going to continue. We still have the park there.
Yeah.
I think what you're really referring to is whether there can be swimming because it can't be supervised. If it can't be supervised, it can't be allowed.
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Mayor, do we know are the bathrooms and stuff open over there? And are DPW picking up trash right now, or?
Just like any park, pick up trash, but the governor's order says there can't be any concessions and anything that could cause people to congregate. So even the governor's banned using fire pits and picnic tables out there because families tend to congregate there. These are things beyond our control. They're imposed upon us by state regulations. So I think it's shut down except it's acting as unmonitored park.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is a frequently asked question. Why don't you use those DRI millions to fund city operations? We had this on the presentation last week, but at least one of our council members has heard additional questioning of this possibility. And we once again want to dispel the rumor that you can use grant monies for pretty much anything. The answer is no, you can't. Would anybody like to add anything to that?
Well, just to specify that no one can because the city doesn't write those contracts for how individual grants are dispersed. There are contracts written between the state and the successful RFP proposer. So this RFP CRP proposal, we really have to renegotiate with the state. Now, once in a while, grant fails, and then the state gives us an opportunity to come up with a life use for those monies. But we never expect that we're going to receive that money back. It's, again, completely at the will of the state. So I think people need to understand this is not a city decision that's being made. And the state has pretty emphatically stated that they have a contract right now with some developer proposing for something in the Durkee Street lot. And if that contract no longer existed, those funds would not be returned.
Right. Thank you.
So we've never been given $4 million for the city to spend.
Right.
We don't have those funds.
Not the city's $4.3 million.
You like to add anything? You like to speak at all?
Sure.
Yeah, the 1,237,000 we have outstanding right now, can be reimbursed for the DRI advance funding for all of the different projects. We're waiting patiently to get that back. I believe we've gotten back 3 applications, one for 13,000 and a couple for about 40 and 50.
Yep.
So we have a tremendous amount of money that's advanced to the state related to this entire downtown revitalization project that we haven't received.
And I think that Ethan actually did an analysis of our vulnerability if the DRI is complete. I think his talk for various other projects and things that weren't directly in the DRI but similar was something like $3 million, wasn't it, vulnerabilities? Spreadsheet you produced.
Yeah, it's considerable.
Which includes the, maybe perhaps the $800,000 for the Saranac River Trail that the city was already committed to as well. And of course, we're now trying to figure out a path to completion. I know you've been working really hard with the banking agencies to see if there's some leeway on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right, there's a significant liability. Not only do we not write the checks, not only do we not receive these big pools of money, but we take a large liability on under the presumption that the various entities will do their part to complete them, and for which we have very little control.
And if we don't complete the projects, we won't receive funding back. Right. Is my understanding that. You must have wrong about that.
Some of them are, you can submit periodic requests for reimbursement. Some of them are benchmark based. So you don't get reimbursed until you complete the entirety of the scope of work. But even for the periodic projects, if at the end of it you don't deliver a completed scope of work, all the reimbursements that they have sent to you up to that point, they do have the opportunity to call them back if the work isn't actually done.
As well as not pay what's outstanding.
Correct.
And the state has announced that they're not going to make any payments on any awards effective April 1 until they resolve their finances. So we could requisition them now. They're not going to be paying now until they resolve the state's finances. We know they're $13 billion hole. So it's not promising until this sorts out, or until we hopefully can receive a large stimulus package to bail out state and local governments for COVID-related losses of revenue.
Well, that concludes this week's frequently asked questions. Next, I would like to move into the projections. And this week, I'd like to do them a little differently. I'm going to show you a snapshot of the spreadsheet that we've been using to predict our losses. And this is a rapidly changing item. But I ask you to indulge me and let me go through some of this. I know we all don't like to look at spreadsheets, but this won't be too painful, I hope. We, at the top, the expenses, the first one is pension contributions, and we haven't made an adjustment for that yet because we just don't know. We anticipate that number is going to go up. We're going to be asked to make more adjustments. Richard, you have a question?
Well, I have some input. We've already adjusted our budget for for a percentage of that back in April, which totaled $687,000 to the general fund, and we also increased that to all other funds based on 35% increase. However, this week the state issued a statement that the retirement fund is not going to be impacted by the COVID expense issues, that the retirement fund is intact, and all million recipients are going to receive their benefits are secure. So nothing is expected to increase on that for this entire year. I can send you that video presentation that they provided to me this week. If you'd like me to.
Okay.
It's an announcement right from Mr. DiNapoli from the state of New York.
Could you send that to the entire council, please? Could you send that to the entire council, please?
Mayor, is that acceptable? Can I do
Just
that?
send it to Beth as always, and she can circulate it.
Okay.
Then next is AIM. At this point, we're predicting a 50% reduction in AIM. We're looking at, we made an allowance for higher healthcare costs, but so far that hasn't been a problem. Healthcare costs are lower, as I understand.
Yeah, we're only about 30% against budget, and that AIM number that we have up there is overstated by $500,000.
You think so, Lynn?
I know so.
$500,000.
Yeah, the AIM number that the city's received, that is to receive this year, based on what's been published by the state and what it's received for the last 8 or 9 years in a row, is $2,600,000, not $3,600,000.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that should be $1,332,000 instead of $1,800,000.
Okay. Okay.
So that's overstated, and that's throwing $500,000 more into the mix here as a problem, and I think we should actually publish because it's inaccurate calculation.
So let me just very quickly go through these other items. That means that our bottom line changes slightly, but we're counting on sales tax reduction of 26%, parking 90% reduced, recreation fees 85%. Yes,
Those two items for parking and recreation don't affect the general fund.
they affect the rec complex and the parking fund.
Right, so
Yes.
they won't draw anything against the general fund's available fund balance.
Okay.
They're just anticipated revenues, or what we call estimated revenues. If they don't materialize in parking, or if they don't materialize in the rec complex, that has nothing to do with the general fund. So those should be removed from this total too.
Yes. Okay.
They won't create a requirement for the general fund to send any money to those.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next slide then. Sounds like we need to make some corrections.
Yeah, just we need to update that so we have all everything accurate and it's being displayed correctly.
Okay.
Well, so Richard, that slide says we're looking at, Mike, can you go back to that real quick about a remaining budget shortfall of $3,645,000. If I remember the last one that we looked at, it was like $3,043,700 or something like that. So is that still at about like $3,043,000, or with those changes you were talking about, how close do you think that $3,645,000 is?
Well, I looked at the list from last week. It said after an adjustment out of the general fund of about $1,300,000, we'd be at $2.8 million. So that number should have actually been about $1.4 million. I think it was double what it should have been. And that was based on the analysis last week. The number I have from that same worksheet with the correct figures would be $2,698,000. And then if you take the $1,288,000 that was projected to be used from the general fund balance last week, it would take the expected loss or deficit because of the COVID-related issues to be about $1,410,000. I think last week we said it was $2.8 million. So it's about half as much as predicted last week.
So $1.4 million, does that include the savings from like the furloughs? Because I remember when we were talking before, we had about $3,043,000 roughly, and with the furloughs, if in the projections were if those were made for the rest of the year, library shut down the rest of the year, rec shut down the rest of the year, we're talking about 750,000 being saved, maybe with some others adding up to 1.5 million of other budget cuts. So is that 1.4 million you're talking about now? Does that include? Now the furloughs are only for 3 months, so I think it's probably around like what 300,000. So is that net of the money saved that we've cut so far, or is that total and that the money we've saved thus far will be subtracted from that budget deficit?
No, the 1.4 million that I'm talking about is following the same premise as this is, just showing you the potential losses of revenue and increases in expenditures based on, what we know that's going to be the bad news. It's not net of anything else besides anything that would be taken out of the general fund available fund balance. And I think that figure last week was about 1,288,000. So that's where the 1,410,000 comes from. Same analysis as last week, and same analysis as this detail. No reductions for expenses for anything that's happened so far. Now, the expense reductions that are going on right now, of course, we're going to see more information on those later. But the initial figure that I gave you all was about $750,000 of payroll and Social Security contributions if all 26 people on the list who were furloughed remain off the payroll for the general fund for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, that's why I round down to like 300,000 instead of 750,000, because instead of 8 months, you're talking 3 months. So I figured that was just rough math. So you're saying that the number on this slide of the 365 you're estimating to be around 1.4, but the total remaining amount to be made up at the bottom would be less, maybe, right? Is that what I'm getting?
What I'm saying is, if you take the expense issues that we're faced with, where we're going to, lose half of the income, lose 26% of the sales tax, lose 100% of the events revenue of 50,000, and lose $127,000 of the fees for the city. That total loss of revenue is going to be $2,698,000. Now, if you take the 1,288,000 that was projected to be used from the general fund balance last week, that would bring it down to 1,410,000. Now, that's on the same basis as what was presented last week.
Now, back up just one step there. So you have the 2.6 million. What is that? 1.4 million? What's that? I'm having a hard time hearing you. So what were you saying that 1.4 of last week?
Well, last week it was predicted that there was a $2.8 million shortfall after using $1,288,000 of the general fund available fund balance.
Well, hold on, that wasn't actually true, was it? I think they said they wanted to stretch the fund balance over 2 years, 2020 and 2021. So the amount used this year was only going to be 444,000 prorated.
Well, that's what's on this sheet, but last week it was 1,288,000.
We got a lot more ground to cover here. Can we revisit this next week with maybe some more accurate figures?
Yeah, there's a lot of details, but I just wanted to correct the figures that are up here that either are overstated because of an incorrect calculation, or they don't apply to the general fund because of an incorrect conclusion.
Okay.
And that would just.
We'll visit that again
Could I
next
ask
week.
just one question?
Sure.
The 1.4 million loss, is that reflective with the furloughs or without the furloughs?
It's got nothing to do with the furloughs.
So the furloughs have no effect?
The furloughs are going to reduce the loss eventually.
Right.
All this is saying is here's the loss of revenues that we're concerned about creating a deficit in the general fund.
But not taking the furloughs into account.
Not netting against that at all, no.
So if everybody kept their jobs, we're 1.4 million in the hole, technically speaking.
Correct, based on these items as revenue.
So if everybody was to pull together and take a percentage of loss and pay, like 2%, then nobody would lose a job based upon the average payroll of a city and payroll of these cities on a weekly basis is a 125,000 roughly.
Well, you'd have to look at just the general fund piece of that, because all we're talking about here, Councilor Brody, is the general fund.
Okay.
And once again, last week, there was two figures used, which Councilor Kelly put up was, you know, we're going to ignore the $688,000 surplus the general fund was going to produce this year, as well as take $600,000 out of the general fund available fund balance and use that $1,288,000 to offset a potential loss, would get it down to $2.8 million for the year. But I'm just saying that that was overstated by about double.
So we're actually $1 million ahead of the game already, roughly.
Well, not really. It's just that these calculations need to be accurate, and they're just overstated
All right.
by about
Okay.
$1,372,000.
We're gonna move on to the next slide. Some money saving ideas have been floated. You can take a look at that. It was brought up that we should produce a profit loss statement for all of our operations, see which operations are actually bringing in money and which aren't. We've talked about the idea of letting accumulated sick time be applied to retirement. That, of course, will require a civil service buy-in. And we wonder if the county can take over our tax collections as a way for us to save money. And we'd like to be able to collect all the monies due whenever the taxpayer can pay them. 2018 taxes, 2019, et cetera. And don't make the taxpayers pay all the 2020 taxes first. Take whatever we can get, in other words. And then it's been floated to have a 10% pay cut for all employees. And that's something we would need to discuss with our unions.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Sure, sure.
So this bullet you have here, don't make taxpayers pay 2020 first. What does the county do? Does the county make, when they do these collections, do they make the taxpayers pay 2020 first?
I do not know. Richard appears to know. He's raised his hand here. Go ahead.
All of New York State is required to collect the newest property tax levies first and work backwards. It's a real property tax law for the state of New York, which was revised in 1993, I believe. Dean can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And since the city adopted that new real property tax law and got away from tax sales and came into the world of foreclosures and collection of liens, it is required by law to collect the most recent levy and work backwards to the oldest one. So the county has to do the same thing as we're doing, as everybody else is doing in New York State based on that law.
Okay, thanks for clearing it up for us.
No problem.
5-year
Is that true
plan.
with them? I understood the county was non-compliant. The county
I'm having a hard time hearing some of you guys, just so, and I'm sure that means people listening from home are having a hard time hearing you guys. Mike, I can hear you fine, but the mayor and Richard, I'm having a very difficult time hearing.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to continue. We need to work on our 5-year plan. As you know, it's going to be due June 1st. We've been talking about revenues and expenses all month, so it shouldn't be too difficult to go ahead and put that together for next year. Some things we take into consideration are the inflation rate, the changes in revenue, our tax levy, AIM, sales tax. We've talked about those at length. Changes in expenses, unplanned expenses, and I just wanted to say that this year's 5-year plan will be exceptionally challenged, not only to produce it, but to execute it going forward. We've had a good track record in previous years, but we really don't know what 2021 is going to bring us exactly. So I will have something prepared for you in the next day or two, and hopefully we can discuss that among ourselves between now and next Thursday and vote on it next Thursday. That concludes today's finance discussion. Okay. Take a quick look at the agenda here. we have several items to move forward tonight. I'm not going to read them all to you. I do want to make sure that there were a couple of items that Ira asked us to move forward, Councilor Barbell asked us to move forward. I just want to make sure that I have those. Let's see. Okay. So why don't we do this? There are 11 items on the agenda to move forward. Let's go ahead and move those, and then as a matter of new business, we'll move the additional 2 items through the committee. Does that sound acceptable?
I think you're going to discuss number 1 a little bit, based on information on how much it costs to install parking spots.
Yeah. Suggest we do that during the meeting. So I'd like to move that we move the first 11 items to the agenda tonight. Can I have a second?
I'll second that, Mike.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Need to do roll call.
Roll call?
Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes.
Okay, is there any old business? Okay, I have two items for new business. These were sent to us by Councilor Barbell, and he would like to move those tonight. I'll just very quickly read them, and then we'll vote to move them forward. The first item, whereas it has been the policy of the city of Plattsburgh to minimize and where able, eliminate overtime compensation, whereas result of declining revenue projections for the city of Plattsburgh 2020 and 2021 budgets due to the COVID-19 pandemic, even further constriction of overtime compensation is required. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved, all unspent overtime in the budget shall be reduced to 0. And it is further resolved that the mayor is directed to report to the common council for every instance where overtime used and approved, a weekly report on overtime approvals containing a description of the unique circumstances that require the use of overtime to allow the common council to audit and authorize payment thereon. I make a motion to move this to tonight's general council meeting. May I have a second?
I'll second that, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. All in favor, roll call.
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes.
Okay, the second item proposed by Councilor Barbell is this. Whereas it is the responsibility of the common council to deliver services to city residents in the most cost-effective manner possible. Whereas, as a result of declining revenue projections for the city of Plattsburgh 20 and 21 budgets due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all cost-saving efforts must be expanded, which includes exploring shared service agreements with municipal partners. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the mayor is directed to initiate discussions with the county with regard to a shared service agreement between the city of Plattsburgh and the Clinton County government for tax collection services. I'll make the motion that we move that to the general meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor, roll call.
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes.
Okay. That is all the new business I have. Does anyone else have any new business to discuss?
An issue was brought up to Council Schneller on potential contract with an agency that would allow for internet access to Trinity Park from our building. And I think they were volunteering to do it for free, so I don't know if any resolution is necessary or not. Councilor Mel, do you have any comment on that?
There was an unsolicited donation presented by PrimeLink where they were offering to provide free wireless access to the public in Trinity Park. I'm not sure exactly how broad that area will be, but at least the park itself, the idea to provide some community benefit because the library and other access points have been closed. The way it was set up though, as far as what was presented or showed to me, it was set up as like a contract. And even though there's no consideration paid by the city, that was the form of the document. So with that, under the charter, the council is required to approve any contracts. In this case, the mayor is recusing himself. So we set the resolution up that the city chamberlain would be authorized to sign that agreement. Again, it doesn't bind the city to do anything. It just gives free access for wireless internet in Trinity, in and around Trinity Park.
Well, that's number 8 on that was moved to the agenda, right?
9.
Oh yeah, very sorry.
So no action we need, we just treat it during the meeting then.
Okay, excellent. Any other new business? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting of the Finance Committee.
Second that.
Councilor
Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes,
Councilor Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes. Let's begin our common council meeting tonight then with the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Councilor Barbell,
Yes, here.
Councilor Kelly,
here.
Councilor Gibbs,
Here.
Councilor Brody,
Here.
Councilor McFarland. Where did he go? Councilor Moore,
Here.
I got a couple of proclamations tonight. One proclamation, whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rates of those who experience sudden illness and injury. Whereas emergency medical services have grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine, whereas the emergency medical service assistance of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital care, medical care providers. Whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether a career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. Whereas it is appropriate to recognize and value the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Therefore, do I, Colin Reed, Mayor of the City of Plattsburgh, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 17th to 23rd, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week, with the theme EMS Strong, Ready Today, Preparing for Tomorrow, and encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities, and I sign my name. And certainly that is all the more relevant in this era of COVID-19, and we're very grateful for their work and of the second ambulance that is able to up the level of care that we provide in the city of Plattsburgh. And then another, also a great honor, a proclamation, whereas Willard Bill Todd has devoted over half a century serving the city of Plattsburgh by operating and maintaining its water system and protecting its residents. Whereas Bill began his career with the city of Plattsburgh water system in the 1960s, has been a critical part of the operation ever since. Whereas Bill has had many experiences in his life, including fireman, fire department officer, town board member, chief water plant operator, and whereas Bill has been the chief plant operator for longer than anyone can remember, except for him probably. And whereas Bill has navigated the operation through numerous trials, changes, and improvements, whereas Bill has trained and mentored many new operators to help sustain the future of water supply, and whereas Bill has reliably led the system through emergencies like droughts and hurricanes, whereas Bill personifies the meaning of service, dedication, and reliability. Now for their be it resolved that I, Paul Reed, Mayor of the City of Plattsburgh, do hereby praise Willard Bill Todd for his life of service and all his accomplishments, and urge the residents of the City of Plattsburgh to join in wishing him a happy and joyous retirement. Be further resolved that we name the city's water filtration plant in his honor. And I've witnessed this and signed my name, and I'd like to give Bill a round of applause. I think that, Ron, you have a couple of words of thanks as well. I'm grateful for his service.
So Bill Todd's been the chief plant operator at the drinking water filtration plant, and he's retiring after 50 years of service. Bill has been the most dedicated public servant this city has ever seen, maybe even to a fault. Bill takes a lot of pride in his responsibilities, and he could get rather ornery if anyone tried to butt in or suggest a change. But you also knew that that was from genuine concern for the water system and the people it serves. Bill viewed this as his duty and his responsibility, two of his many fine qualities. I remember times like during Hurricane Irene, where at 2 a.m. In the middle of a violent storm, when one of our dams was in danger of overtopping and threatening downstream lives, Bill was out there in the dark, in the raging wind, the pelting rain, with only a flashlight, locating just the right valve in the wet, high grass so it could be turned to let out more water to prevent a catastrophe. I also know he'd lie awake at night worrying about the system. You see, that's what you get with Bill Todd. That's what he's all about. Bill spent the majority of his life, not just his career, but his life, making sure people had safe and reliable drinking water. It hasn't been just a job for Bill. It's been his passion and his vocation for over 50 years. I know that Bill's faith is the foundation of who he is and what he is. And I know that God put Bill on this earth to take care of people. Bill, thank you for serving us and protecting us. You've set the bar high, and for that, we say thank you and congratulations.
First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor and John for this presentation. Really kind of heartwarming and unexpected. I've been here many years, and I've seen many mayors and many things go by. And I think the city's had the opportunity to have the best people that we could possibly have working for them. Over the years, I've been under different people, and I've had other people under me. And we've always had very good people working for us. And I think this will continue. And I wish the city the best and get over this virus so we can take our masks off again and act normal again. And I thank you very much for this presentation, and I'll still be around if need me for anything. Thank you.
And you know, we will be drawing upon your expertise and experience. And I'm really gratified that two of your colleagues, Chris and Mike from the respective plants, are here to honor you tonight too. So thank you very much. It's just an honor. We're looking forward to that sign up in front of your building. Thank you. Please continue.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on May 14th, 2020 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Barbell, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending May 20th, 2020 in the amount of $482,842.69 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and second by Councilor Moore. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Passed. You have your packet of various committee reports. Is there any additional reports, starting with governance, strategy, and city operations? Councilor Barbell.
Nothing to report at this time.
City infrastructure, Councilor Moore.
I didn't have anything at this time in addition.
Finance and budget, Councilor Kelly.
New to add, Mayor.
Public safety, Councilor Gibbs.
Yes, we had a meeting today with Chief Lawless, and we have a scheduled meeting on Tuesday with Chief Ritter. I'm very alarmed at the increase of COVID-19 cases and, reported out from the Press Republican, some of the behavior of our local residents. So next week, I asked Chief Lawless to do a presentation to the council. We had an extensive conversation today about overtime, staffing, the second ambulance, and he's put a little more research into the SAFER grant. So I'm expecting next week's council meeting to be filled with a lot of very, very important information. So we will get to that next week.
Thank you. Plattsburgh Public Library, Councilor McFarland.
I have no updates at this time.
And MLD Board President, Councilor McFarland.
Also no updates at this time.
Resolved, the reports of this are hereby ordered received, and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Brody. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondence or recommendation from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills ordered by the Common Council for the week ending May 22nd, 2020 in the amount of $1,293,130.25 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Moore and second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Are there any persons addressing the council on items on the agenda tonight?
No one electronically, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council approves the COVID-19 discount for the outdoor seating fee schedule for the 2020 year only to table fees, $5 per table, parking space use fee, $75 per space.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and second by Councilor Moore. Discussion. I think this is offers a pretty dramatic discount, a COVID-19 discount for this year. What is the usual price? I think was it $300 per space?
$300 per space, yeah.
And on top of this, if I recall, as a former merchant, the individual entities will pay also DPW for the installation of barriers if necessary, although some also put in their own barriers at zero cost themselves. So
that is true.
So I think this would be consistent and a significant reduction in your spirit of trying to assist them in a difficult time to develop the space based on social distancing that's being mandated on them.
Our downtown restaurateurs are going to have a tough time trying to reopen in this environment, and this small gesture will perhaps encourage them and help them along the way.
So I see on the agenda there are a number of businesses who have already submitted their parklet diagrams and their applications. Some of them were easier to see than others because of the electronic pictures of them. So I'm assuming that every one of those businesses is accounting for the appropriate social distancing.
You know, we, in the city, simply enforce any requirement that the state imposes. So nothing in these applications would negate their responsibility to the state in what for these businesses would be I believe a phase 3 opening roughly around June 15th, if I recall correctly.
Well, I have one thing I'd like to address from last year's parklets. Some of the parklets extend beyond the storefronts that they occupy. And I would like to make sure that if they extend beyond their properties, that they get approval from the adjacent properties that they are willing to give up that parking spot in front of their business. I know this came up last year, and I have to agree, if they extend beyond, their area, we need to make sure that the neighbors are happy with the arrangement.
True.
That makes sense. Are you asking to table it to make sure that that doesn't happen, or
Well, would we be able to amend that to where they do go? Some of them do go beyond their property, some don't. But if they do, that we would, can we add that in there, that we get approval from the neighbors that they don't mind them extending out onto their storefronts?
I think you'd have to frame that as a friendly amendment acceptable to the people who moved and seconded.
Now, Jeff, are you talking about the parking spaces or the like if they put tables on the sidewalk? And that kind of goes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Patrick.
I had a question because I see in this resolution we're charging for tables, which I don't think we did before. Does that? So I understand that. So we're charging for the amount of tables that they put in the parking spaces.
We always
Is
charge
correct?
for tables, Counselor.
We always have.
Yes.
And does that apply to people like some restaurants put outside seating on the sidewalk? Okay.
You're only approving the people that use the parking spaces. You're not approving the others. Those are approved just by the permits through the building inspector's office.
Oh, okay.
But everybody pays per table.
But as Jeff, are you talking about people on the sidewalk as well, or just the parking spaces?
Well, no. Some of these parklets extend beyond the storefront that is requesting them. So, say you had a business adjacent and you wanted to maintain your parking spot. Well, you should get permission to be able to extend your business in front of somebody else's business, because you're taking their parking spot, basically.
I can see that. To play devil's advocate, I would say that the parking spots don't belong to the businesses; they belong to the city in general. And you can use parking spaces next to it to go to your place. But I think what you're saying makes sense.
Well, it would just be a courtesy.
Maybe Dean needs to weigh in, but what you're approving is the diagram that they've submitted. So if Dean, I don't know if we need to change.
Yeah, I was, as you were talking, I was looking at the sidewalk application that we had created like 2 or 3 years ago. There is some language in that application. I'm not able to cite it entirely because I'm just looking at it as we speak. But there is language that prohibits any sidewalk parklet operation from interfering or impeding the adjoining property owner. And there's also requirements for the application when they submit their site plan or their layout that they depict the property boundaries. And I believe the intent and the spirit is to keep within directly in front of the storefront or within their property bounds. So I don't know if there's specific, there's 2 ways to deal with it. One, we could reduce the amount of parking spaces if we know there's a trouble spot, depending on a specific location. If we can identify 1 or 2, you could actually reduce the amount of spaces that you're allocating. Or alternatively, you could approve these, but also request that the application be clarified to prohibit any parklets in front of any adjoining owner without their permission.
Yeah, that sounds like what we're looking for, or what I'm looking for, Dean. It's just to have a permission.
Okay, so I mean, you could, I guess the easiest way, since that first resolution is kind of the only generic one, you could add, maybe we can suggest some amended language to say, and further amend the application as you just described.
We're looking for an amendment to the resolution to say that any diagram that exceeds the boundaries immediately in front of the property can be approved by the building inspector only if adjacent properties agree. Is that satisfactory amendment?
Would work for me.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
acceptable?
Any further discussion? Let's vote on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Do we have a first and second on the amendment?
It was the original first and seconders, I believe. Was it Councilor Moore and Councilor Gibbs?
Councilors Moore and Kelly.
Kelly? Okay.
That was the vote on the, just on the fees. So then wouldn't we need a first and second on the vote on the amendment fee?
No, this is a friendly amendment. Just as long as those two accepted it, I think we're fine.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize you said friendly amendment, but sure, okay, that's fine.
Just one brief point, if the property line extends into the street and bisects the space, does that
Still
count?
have to require the permission, I would imagine, yeah. Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. And now you're back to the further discussion on the motion or the resolution itself. Seeing no further discussion, may I have a roll call, please?
Councilor Barbell?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Brody?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
So items B through F are individual requests. You may be willing to take them all up at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to waive the reading on B through F and move to resolution.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilor Barbell?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Brody?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
And just as one more concept, the Carol McLean contacted me. She's the owner of Irises and a recipient of one of these parklets that has been approved and is approved every year. And she noted that with the phase 3 opening coming up in June, other cities have opted to have street closures and make the area more pedestrian and restaurant friendly. This is something you've read, I'm sure, in New York City and across the country with this expected 6-foot social distancing notes between tables. It's going to limit the number of tables and revenue for her. And in addition, with the hardship having to do with the Canadian border closure and tourism sales being way down, the New York Restaurant Association has stated, and the SLA is considering allowing temporary expansion of licensed premises so long as municipalities agree to these sorts of expanded seating and street closures. She's proposed for your consideration closing of the various streets on alternate days, perhaps one street closure weekly on Wednesday through Saturday of the summer, and alternately other days alternating between City Hall Place and Margaret Street. So multiple downtown restaurants could benefit from the extra seating involved, or that would create. So, you know, it's probably a pretty large topic for discussion, but and we have some time because June 15th is probably when phase 3 will be initiated, but I could put that forward to you as something to consider.
Mayor Reed?
Yeah.
I don't see how we can do that with Margaret Street because isn't that Route 9?
Well, there is no official Route 9 in the city. The city has full jurisdiction over state roads in the city of Plattsburgh. Route 9 as a state road begins and ends with our boundary.
But isn't that the through direction? Or you know what I mean? Isn't that the designated through way for Route 9?
Yeah, it is.
It is a major street, and so we have had closures before regularly on City Hall Place past year.
No, not City Hall Place. We're talking about Margaret Street.
No, City Hall Place is the extension of Route 9, I believe. And
So
22 are Oak and Catherine Street.
I think that would need to be looked into though before we even consider discussing it. I don't know who we would go to within the government structure to look that up. Would that be Public Works possibly, or?
I guess the planner and Dean could discuss it.
Yeah, I think that needs to be looked into before we even bring it to the table for discussion. I'm not sure if we have the authority to close that out because it's state route.
Well, we'll ask Moline and Dean to chat about that for next week and see if there's any interest in bringing that up any farther. But I just wanted to let you know that idea has been brought forward. So that's item through F. Next is G.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council adopts the $40,000 additional funding bond resolution, thereby increasing the $930,000 bond resolution adopted by the Common Council on December 19th, 2019 for the financing of the construction of the Arnie Pavone Memorial Parking Lot as a consequence of cost increases supported by change orders approved by the Common Council on May 7th, 2020 for additional appropriations to the total spending now provided for under Capital Project H5110.65.
Moved by Councilor Barbell and second by Councilor Brody. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yes.
Councilor Moore.
yes,
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves adjustment to the 2020 general fund budget by $125,366 equally in estimated revenues and appropriations for the unbudgeted cost of drafting the local waterfront revitalization plan and for updating the city's comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance under work to be performed by Saratoga Associates as authorized by Common Council Resolution 7A adopted on February 20th, 2020, and is further authorized by the signed agreement between the City of Plattsburgh and Saratoga Associates dated March 25th, 2020.
Moved by Councilor Barbell and second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion.
So what is this doing? Because I know this is paid by a grant. This is just approving the funds to be distributed out of the general fund to then later be reimbursed by the grant.
That's correct. The council's already approved the signing of the contract, and the city's already been awarded the grant. The contract with the state is in place. So this is simply an accounting function.
Are you reassured at this point that these state grant funds will come through?
Yes, there's been no statement from New York State regarding grants in which contracts have already been signed. They have made statements to the effect that contracts yet to be signed should be put on hold until further notice. But we do have a signed contract from Department of State for this grant, so there should be no issue.
And if there were an issue,
If there were an issue, then the state would necessarily stop reimbursement of a number of different grants, and that would bode very badly for municipalities all across the state. And I imagine that would be an avenue of last resort for cost savings.
Yeah, I will know, Mike, that the Division of Budgets Directive B1223 said it's didn't affect anything that was in operation and under contract. And this there's already a committee that's met a couple of times to start the process with. So this grant's well underway.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Councilor Bardell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yes.
Councilor Moore.
yes,
In accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council approves that the City Chamberlain is authorized to sign a free wireless agreement with PrimeLink for wireless internet access for public to use in the downtown area. Map made part of the minutes of the meeting. This is a community donation at no cost to the City of Plattsburgh.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor McFarland. Discussion?
I think this is really fantastic. So one of the problems I know that my students in my school district have had is we're all on remote learning and remote instruction, and we have many families in this North Country, not just the school district that I teach in, where children just don't have access to Wi-Fi and they haven't been able to maintain their assignments. So I think this is really, I don't think that's what this was originally intended for, but I just want to say I think that's a really great gesture.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We've been talking about doing this for a long time. I think it was even a discussion as part of the DRI. So anything to get free, internet access. Are they going to have to install something in City Hall or something along? What about hardware?
They'll install a router somewhere on the south side of our building, probably inside a window.
Small price to pay.
And I think I know that I'll be recusing myself in any vote, obviously. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yes.
Councilor Moore.
yes,
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council approves extending contract number 2017-8 sludge hauling for WPCP until May 31st, 2021 with drum septic service for the estimated lump sum price of $186,224.48.
By Councilor Moore and second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion?
John, is that the same price that it was under before?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yes.
Councilor Moore.
yes,
Whereas the City of Plattsburgh Common Council recognizes Willard Bill Todd for his life of service to the City of Plattsburgh, be it resolved that the water filtration plant is hereby renamed Willard Bill Todd Water Filtration Plant.
I have a unanimous first and second. I think it's unanimous. Any further discussion? Bill, I think this says it right. You've given a lifetime of service on behalf of keeping clean and safe water for the City of Plattsburgh. We cannot be more grateful for all of your work and your dedication. It's just one I'd love to this COVID-19 year to come up and give you a hug. I won't, but we're so grateful.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call?
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Counselor McFarland, Counselor Moore.
Yes.
Item L was added during the committee meeting. Whereas it has been the policy of the city of Plattsburgh to minimize and where able, eliminate overtime compensation. And whereas in his role as chief executive officer of the city, which includes the direction and supervision of the administration of all departments, the mayor has directed department heads to constrict to the maximum amount possible the use of and approval of overtime. And whereas as a result of declining revenue projections for the city of Plattsburgh 2020 and 2021 budgets, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, even further constriction of overtime compensation is required. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that every department's unspent overtime budget line items as of May 28, 2020 shall be reduced by 85%. And it is further resolved that the mayor is directed to report to the Common Council for every instance where overtime used and approved a weekly report on overtime approvals containing a description of the unique circumstances that require the use of overtime to allow the Common Council to audit and authorize payment thereon.
Moved by Councilor Barbell, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion.
Yeah, I have a question because that seems to be slightly different than the one Mike read at committee. Because I remember when Mike was reading, I was reading it off the email I had received on my phone, and I remember Mike read something instead of 85% down to 0.
There were some additional changes recommended by Council Schneller right before we came to the meeting this afternoon. Patrick, I hope you had a chance to see those in your email.
Was the one I read that came in at 4:05 the right one, Mike? Yes?
Yes. Actually, the one I read was the wrong one. Dean elaborated a little bit for us.
So I guess you'd be then moving and seconding a revised amended version.
You can do that.
We've got a first and second for discussion.
I mean, this seems rather reasonable. I don't really like resolutions coming on last minute, but I know Elizabeth has been talking about lowering overtime for all departments for months now, and it seems to make sense if we're under a budget cut. And this doesn't mean they can't get overtime, they just have to come to the council, right?
No, I don't think this would require them to kind of work with the mayor to get approval for overtime. And obviously the mayor can work with the department heads. There are some instances if a water main breaks in the middle of the night, there are certain emergencies that are obvious that they have to be handled with overtime. So this doesn't say you can't do anything, but what this will give, I think, to the council over a period of time is a clear picture of where overtime is being used in what department and the types of things that are causing overtime to occur, which may lead and hopefully will lead to some conversation about perhaps there are alternative ways to staff or deal with the overtime issue that is driving the budget.
Oh, okay, I see. They don't come to the council for approval, but the mayor has to make a weekly report on the approvals that he.
Well, the council will get the overtime list, and the money will not be transferred until the council approves the authorization for that transfer of overtime monies.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yes.
Councilor Moore.
Yes.
Item M was added during the committee meeting. Whereas it is the responsibility of the Common Council to deliver services to city residents in the most cost-effective manner possible. And whereas as a result of declining revenue projections for the city of Plattsburgh 2020 and 2021 budgets due to the COVID pandemic, all cost-saving efforts must be explained, which includes exploring shared service agreements with municipal partners. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the mayor is directed to initiate discussions with the county with regard to a shared service agreement between the city of Plattsburgh and the Clinton County government for tax collection services.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs. So second by Councilor Barbell. Discussion.
Would combining tax collection services combine tax foreclosure as well? Because I know we're a foreclosing entity, and so is the county.
This is a resolution to start a conversation. I think Richard and I have looked into this in the past, and there are some significant steps that would be required as far as accomplishing this. So this is somewhat of a rhetorical resolution, which starts the conversation, but it isn't going to bind anything. It's going to determine whether it's even possible, and if so, whether the county is willing to engage.
Yeah, so it's just to start a discussion. It's not an action item. Okay.
Further discussion? Roll call?
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yes.
Councilor Moore,
yes,
No travel requests at this time. Are there any additional resolutions for initial consideration?
Yes, Councilor Barbell brought to us a third resolution that we would like to go ahead and move tonight to invoke Rule 4 and vote on tonight. And I will read it, or Beth, do you have it?
yes, well, I was sent it at 4:05, is that the right one?
Yes, would you read it, please?
This will be under new business, a resolution introduced by Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
and it will be moved with Rule 4. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has caused economic strain on property owners and renters within the city of Plattsburgh, and whereas the Clinton County Assessor's Office has directed by New York State policy, has recently reassessed and adjusted property values in the city of Plattsburgh, and whereas reassessment increases may exacerbate the economic strain on property owners within the city of Plattsburgh, particularly on commercial property owners. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the Common Council hereby requests that our county and state representatives and governor pursue a moratorium on real property reassessments, not just in the city of Plattsburgh and Clinton County, but for the state as a whole. And it is further resolved that a certified copy of this resolution be transmitted to our county legislators and state representatives and governor by the mayor's office.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, and second by Councilor Barbell. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Outstanding, yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yes.
Councilor Moore,
yes.
Any other new business or councilor reports or items for additional discussion?
I have a question. If Rich's reports and facts and numbers are correct, rather than being 3.6 million off, we're only 1.4 million, right, Rich?
Well, going back to that sheet, the one that I have is 5.4 million. I don't know what the new one said, but the 4 items that I have on that list, it would be appropriate to say, yes, these are what we're anticipating losing out, 2,698,000.
Right. Now,
So then if you're gonna subtract 444,000 from it, it'd make it about 2.2 million.
All right.
I don't know what you're gonna subtract from it if the discussion changes.
yeah, we have 26 employees that may lose their job, correct?
I believe 26 from the general fund for furlough, yeah.
Right.
But
And out of some of them,
7 of those were part-timers from the police department for school crossing.
okay, so that brings it down to 19.
Yep.
Out of that 19, you're gonna be losing, I think it's 6 for retirement.
I'd have to look at that. I don't believe that was all in the general fund, no.
Okay,
There's several retirements going on with the various funds, but
what I'm trying to think is, because I've been trying to work, I don't have my calculator with me. Our average payroll for the city of Plattsburgh is $482,842.69 per week, correct?
are you looking at today's number?
Yes,
That's a bi-weekly payroll.
okay,
That includes all funds and not just the general fund.
all right.
So what we're talking about, once again, is just the general fund when it comes to those 20-some people that have been furloughed.
Right, because I was trying to think that if everybody across the board was to take a 3% cut in pay, nobody would lose a job, if my math is correct.
I'd have to look at the numbers, but, you know, it's an idea, that's worth looking at, I guess.
Is
My
it
opinion.
possible that we could actually do that for everybody involved? You're a great number man.
If.
Can we make that resolution?
The mayor's gonna allow me to work on it.
Certainly, as a matter of fact, I think the very first night that the finance committee discussed the budget shortfalls under the stipulations of the civil service that we had to present a certain number of line items to be then negotiated with the unions.
Yes.
One of the things that I'd recommended at that time was, is there a way to avoid the layoff by simply everybody taking whatever the portion of pay cut
And I mean,
is?
everybody from councilors, the mayor,
Everybody.
straight across the board, every single employee that works for the city, take 2%, 3%,
Whatever
and
works out.
save those jobs. If we had a modest percentage and we didn't rehire for the ones that are retiring, I think that would be there. And not only that, I think you might even solve part of the debt.
Steve,
Yes, ma'am.
one of the issue, I support that idea 100%, but I think one of the issues that hinders us from passing a resolution to make that absolutely happen is the fact that a number of these employees have a collective bargaining agreement, and collective bargaining rights can't be overridden by a budget resolution to take cuts in pay. Those would have to be things that are bargained within each individual bargaining unit. And if they decided to do that within their bargaining unit, they could then bring that back to us as a suggestion. But I don't think that, and Dean, you can chime in if I'm wrong, but we can't just unilaterally make that if it flies against a collective bargaining agreement.
And I don't think that's what you're proposing.
No.
I think you're proposing for us to have a discussion with all the various groups to see if we can come to an agreement to make a voluntary cut.
Well,
to avoid the layoffs.
I think the first step is to find out what that percentage would be, where Rich comes in. Rich can say, hey, you know what? Everybody takes a 1%, 2%, 1.5%. Nobody loses a job. And the city of Plattsburgh has wonderful employees. You have an unbelievably great example tonight. And that goes through the city for years. People have been dedicated to the city, and they care for the city, and they work for the city, from your garbage man straight up to the mayor. And it's a shame to lose anybody because of budgets. It's a shame to fire anybody because of the budget. Everybody has to balance the budget, but we are a team. And as a team, like with insurance, if we all say, all right, you know what? To save my team, I will give up 1.5% of my pay or 2%. And I think the first step to know is, what is that percentage? And I think to save people's jobs and keep everybody going in a time like this, it's a great way. And that's the second thing unrelated to this that I heard us say today, was that we should tell the taxpayers that write to the county to protest the increase that they're going to do on the not increase, reassessment on the businesses they're going to do. What we should be saying is, we, along with our citizens, should write a letter protesting to the county on the reassessment and requesting that our taxes be frozen for the next year or two and not be increased or whatever. You are kicking businesses in the city of Plattsburgh when they're down, they're struggling, they're hanging on by a thread. You're going to raise their taxes. That's horrible.
It is.
So
I think that's a shared sentiment, and as a matter of fact, when the assessments went up last year, how this council responded was to lower the tax rate.
Yeah.
Everybody will certainly do that again,
yeah, but the
but
thing
everybody's got
is,
to do it, right?
it's a downward spiral. You lower, the county raises your taxes to your citizens, and what's the city do? They lowered the taxes. All right, but yet now the city's operating on less money.
No, we 1% less because.
Yeah, well,
the
1%
assessments went
less.
up by 4%.
And what would that 1% do for our employees? Would that have kept everybody employed without us having this conversation?
I just like to say that, well, in us passing the resolution tonight to recommend to the county that they freeze tax increases and have a moratorium on further reassessments, that we have done. We've sent that letter you're talking about.
Well, let's send it big and bold to the Press Republican and every place else.
And we can send it again if we need to.
I think it's a great
And
idea.
it doesn't help if the assessment goes up and we lower our taxes to make sure we're not pulling more money out of the taxpayer's pocket. But if the county and the school district don't do the same thing, the taxpayers still are going to see a higher bill, and they don't know that the city's bill actually went down. They just see a bigger bill. So it's one of those things that, again, everybody's got to agree to do this as well, not just the city, because the city taxpayer is paying three ways, not just city taxes, they're paying county taxes and school district taxes. And the county, as you saw, as you heard from one of the representatives, legislators, that they could have done something about this. The county lowered their tax rate by pennies, but with the assessment going up so much, still much more money was drawn out of individual citizens' pockets.
Well,
We
that's
all
not
have to
right.
be trying to not bleed taxpayers at this critical time.
That's absolutely right.
Well, I will note that I don't think they're reassessing commercial properties, just residential, but
They
either
said
way-
that last week, 2 weeks ago, my very first meeting here, he said that they were going to do it this year. They were going to reassess downtown values, but they couldn't do it because of COVID-19. And that next year they were going to be assessing all commercial rentals. They're going to be reassessing apartments and down through the area. It's horrible. How could you be putting somebody through COVID-19 and very next year smack them over the head with taxes?
Right.
Increases, tentatively speaking.
Well, I think every member of the council is agreeing with you on that.
All right, let's send the county a big letter.
We will.
Let's our citizens know that we're against it.
Thank you, Steve.
And to Steve's other point, with the if a 3% cut is the number, we could perhaps do that by having everyone take 1 day off a month. I think if you take 12 days off a year, then that lowers the that's a 3.3 roughly percentage drop in the amount worked. So that way their wages per day's worked actually wouldn't change at all if we can stagger them throughout a month or something along those lines, depending on what the numbers are.
That's what other large organizations have done, is a kind of a voluntary furlough of 1 day a month or something like that, rather than, so people, their salaries will ultimately end up going down because leave without pay, but they're also getting an extra vacation day out of it. So there's clever things that we should explore along the spirit of what you offered in a one, all for one and one for all kind of way. I think that's a very important contribution. Thank you. Any other new business? This then is the time for any members of the public to please come address the council on any issues of mutual concern. And Beth, have you heard any further? I think not. So,
No comments electronically.
County Legislator Rosenquist.
Hey, folks. Chris Rosenquist, County Legislator Area 9. Steve, if you don't know where my legislative district is, it is kind of follows Cornelia Street. As for anybody else, follows Cornelia Street That's the northern border. The southern border follows the river and it just jogs back and forth across Bridge Street. So there may be some questions. I heard a resolution passed tonight that is going to indicate some communication to the county to help support the lessening or the halting of assessments throughout New York State. 100% would support that, and it's a partnership, right? And that's, I think, what you identified and what you indicated. I appreciate that. I'm here to help clarify some questions, maybe. It seemed like the last time I was here, there were still some questions after I left. And so without beating a dead horse or trying to speak down to anybody who might know this process, I certainly want to clarify some things that may have been unclear. Per the assessment agreement provided by the County Real Property Office, and I sent that to you all. I believe that you should have received that. If you haven't, then I'll just make sure I'll follow up with that. Per that agreement, the County Real Property Office has performed assessment services on behalf of the city since January of 2018. If you haven't reviewed that, if you haven't seen that contract yet, I certainly would encourage you to review it and get any clarifications that you might need clarified for those services that are provided. Before this agreement was signed, assessments were performed by the city. And just as with most shared services models, this arrangement is intended to provide an overall cost savings to our communities. This contract is due at the end of this year, and I think you've all indicated that there might be some attitude towards re-engaging in some type of shared services conversation. 100% would be looking forward to that conversation. If you all choose not to go with an assessment service or the assessment services that the county provides, you can certainly hire, and this is coming up at the end of this year, so you can certainly hire an in-house assessor, and several communities throughout the county do that. And the varying degree of services that the county provides range from full assessment services to some partial assessment services. The Clinton County's Real Property Department is managed by Director Martine Gagnon. She reports to County Administrator Mike Zerlo. I'm the chairperson for the County Economic Development and County Operations Committee. The County Administrator, County Attorney, County Clerk, County Historian, IT, Planning, Real Property, and Weights and Measures present to this committee. And this committee is tasked with such things as providing direction on contracts, yearly planning, changes in service pricing, and expenditures such as equipment, travel, software packages, and memberships. No committee chair at the county level has the authority to direct the work of any department that reports to their committee. Property assessments are performed each year under the process and timeline controlled solely by New York State real property tax law. And in most cases throughout the county, the process of reassessment starts around August, late summer, the year prior leading up to a May 1st state deadline to submit tax rolls, tentative tax rolls. Once assessments are performed, the tentative assessment for the following year is prepared, letters are sent out to affected property owners, and the tentative roll is submitted to the state before the required deadline. It's also at that point, residents can call real property office to dispute any changes to their assessment. It's a completely painless process. They expect it to happen, and there's a structure in there for disputing the actual assessment. The goal for reassessment is to ensure that all municipalities meet the 100% equalization rate as determined by the state. And this was mentioned last week or last time we were here, that the equalization rate is a state analysis that compares the assessed value of properties to local sales prices, so the market value of similar properties. And then it was also explained last time that in most cases, if the state determines that an equalization rate in a community and a municipality is within 5% or a 95% equalization rate, an assessment can be postponed. This is an option for municipal. Sorry.
30 seconds.
Are you not going to let me finish my?
Well, there's a 5-minute public comment time here.
Okay. I'll provide the rest of this to you. Noted, I'm going to skip that part, but regarding tax rate, because there's a question about tax rates. 2020 county tax rates for all municipality is 5.90, every single one. The difference between individual municipalities tax rate is the difference between you taking your credit versus you taking your sales tax as a cash payment, and then some chargebacks. And that chart was also provided to you, I believe. Side note, the city's sales tax revenue is based on the decennial census population. So if you haven't completed your census or your community members haven't completed their census, I would certainly encourage you to do that. And then finally, it certainly is unfortunate that assessments happen, especially during this time, but assessments happen every year. I certainly welcome any partnership, like you mentioned, Steve, to partner with the county to send a message to the state to help some relief. And that's what I look forward to. All right, thanks, folks.
You might have been confused. I don't think there is a discussion of reconsidering the contract with the assessor's office. Is discussing a contract with tax collection, which I think is another department. And I guess I do have one question.
Sure, that's under the treasurer's office, and I believe that the treasurer has also approached the city on some types of shared services for both. I think Councilor McFarland mentioned foreclosures, and I believe our treasurer has invited the city of Plattsburgh to have a conversation about shared services about that, as well as tax collection. My point about the assessment service is that this contract is coming up due and is ending at the end of this year. It's a 3-year contract signed January 2018. It's coming up due at the end of this year, and it's now, I think, would be an opportunity to re-enter into that agreement if it's amicable to the city.
So last year, when the city assessments went up an average 3.91%, if I recall, 4%.
I also sent those actual numbers to the council, so you should have those actual numbers.
I guess my question was, did you advocate to lower the county tax rate by an equal percentage to make sure that more money is not drawn out of people's pockets?
In 2018, 2019, when I was the chair of the finance committee, our tax rate actually decreased to the lowest rate that it had been in 10 years.
And how much was that?
Right now it's at 5.90 where it started. I also provided that sheet to you all. I think it was 597,
So
something like that.
Down by 0.1% when the taxpayers end up paying 4% more in assessments. So that's, what we did is make sure that the tax rate went down by more than the assessment increase.
Okay.
So I think you're talking about a nominal pennies here and pennies there. I think it worked out to 0.1%. So clearly the taxpayers, when we do so much work to try to lower the taxes in the city, it doesn't help when the county in essence raises the tax burden on taxpayers.
As mentioned, the goal of any assessment is to bring any municipality up to 100% equalization rate. Short of that, as I also mentioned, the state defines and dictates when an assessment can happen. And quite frankly, an assessment, if a municipality is within that 5%, as I mentioned, or 95% equalization rate, a municipality doesn't have to make an assessment. However, the problem is, and what the city saw in 2016, 2017, was that the assessment was not brought up to a 100% equalization rate. So when the county took over assessment services, that's when the assessments had to come up to the 100% equalization rate.
But you're talking gobbledygook. We're asking if the assessments go up by a certain percent, why don't you lower the tax rate by the same amount so you're not pulling more money out of taxpayers' pockets? I'm asking you what your vote was to make sure that we didn't further burden city taxpayers as our city representative.
The tax rate is a combination of sales tax revenues as well as whatever's in the county coffers. Our county budget officer, very good at what he does, provide that tax rate. And as I said, we lowered that tax rate. What the individual municipalities can do, they can, cut their own services. They can save here and there to help offset those increased expenses towards their own municipal residents, just like most other municipalities do. We can't, as we define the tax rate for the entire county, that isn't applicable to the entire county. And sure, of course, we're sensitive to individual struggles that municipalities have. But, at the same time, we can't say, for you, we're going to do this, and for these other people, we're going to do that.
No, I think the entire county is in the same boat. Councilor Kelly?
I want to understand this exhibit D that you,
Yes.
I believe you sent us that. And I think I understand it. It says that the city's tax rate in 2019 was $5.95 per thousand.
Okay.
In 2020, it went down to $5.90 per thousand, and that's a 5-cent decrease. But let's see, so the net tax for the city then is 594 for 2019 and 592 for 2020. So what's the difference between gross and net?
So again, if you look at the gross column, that's the tax rate for every municipality.
Yes, I see
Okay,
that.
yeah. And the net tax rate is actually a combination of chargebacks. So, you know, there might have been a reassessment in your community. If you look down at the bottom towards the town of Plattsburgh, where they were assessed at 6.03, there might have been a judgment or a reassessment that that municipality owed the county more money than what they paid. Same thing with the city of Plattsburgh. The tax rate in the city of Plattsburgh is 5.90. There was A430 chargebacks, as well as in the bottom, you can see the net tax rate includes A430 chargebacks, tax bill printing charges, and omitted taxes. And that's a combination of those chargebacks and those expenses charged back to the municipality, or the county sometimes owes municipalities money, and then they have to also pay down that money. For example, the village of Dannemora. The village of Dannemora actually have two villages. The village of Dannemora and the town of Dannemora had a net tax rate of 5.88, which essentially means that the county owed them money and we ended up having to pay them back some money. I can give the details as to why, and I can get the details as to why you're at 5.92, 0.02 cents above the, or whatever those chargebacks were, and I can provide that to you.
Well, you know, to the unschooled observer here, which I am, it looks as though Scholar Falls, for example, paying 276,
yep,
266 per thousand. They're paying half what we pay. Why is that?
Yeah, so that's as I mentioned before, I ran out of time. The municipalities have two different ways to collect sales tax. One is a cash payment, and the other one is a credit. The town of Plattsburgh, city of Plattsburgh, town of Champlain, village of Champlain, Rouse's Point, the villages of Dannemora, and I think there's one more that I'm missing. They all take their sales tax as a cash payment. So that's why there's no adjusted tax rate in that sales tax credit column. That you see a zero next to those municipalities. There's no sales tax credit. Those folks who take theirs as a credit, they say, okay, we're gonna take a chunk of our sales tax, we're gonna give it to you, the county. The county's gonna then lower your rate, and then they're gonna take the other part of their sales tax and throw it into their municipal coffers.
Is that a better way, Chris?
Pardon?
Is that a better way than what we're doing?
Would
that lower our taxes to our constituents?
I can't. You gotta have to ask Richard.
Okay.
Or
I'm just wondering.
The mayor.
You're the man.
I haven't analyzed your how you manage your taxes, so I.
It sounds like a wash to me. It sounds like it's a netting of the numbers, so you don't send out a large tax bill to your taxpayers.
Right.
By netting the sales tax against it.
Right.
Instead of taking in as revenue on one
So-
side of the equation and then charging property taxes on the other.
So it's half of one, sixth of another.
Yeah, it sounds like a wash. I have to take a look at the numbers, but it sounds like it should be an even swap.
I had two questions for you,
Yes,
Chris. One, I was told recently that, let's say the city of Plattsburgh has delinquent property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
It has to pay the county the taxes. And even though Steve Brody didn't pay his taxes, the city of Plattsburgh has to pay the taxes to the county. Now, if the county was in charge of collecting the property taxes, even though Steve Brody didn't pay the county the property taxes, the county would still have to reimburse the city for the money versus the city not collecting the money and reimbursing the county.
Say that again. It's a little like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, the city collects the money.
Okay.
And they pay it to the county.
Okay.
Now, even though Steve Brody didn't pay 2019 property taxes, the city still has to pay that to the county, correct?
Okay.
Now, if the county was to collect the sales tax,
From the city.
not the sales tax, but property taxes
From the city.
from the city,
And that you owed those sales tax or
and
those
then the
property
county
taxes.
would have to pay it to the city would get that money in full.
What you're talking about is the difference between the city guaranteeing the county's tax roll.
Or the county?
The county guaranteeing the city's tax roll at the end of the particular tax year.
Right. And I think
it
it,
guarantees the county's collection of their tax roll by the end of the tax levy year. And if there's anything that's delinquent, then the city forecloses on those properties or sets up a payment arrangement and collects those taxes over time with interest.
yes. So I'd like to ask Rich to study that a little bit to see which way is best for the city to go. Is it better for the county to pay us, or is it better for us to pay the county? I don't want you to answer that question right now, but.
Well, I think
but
that,
could be a significant cash savings for the city in some ways.
We have to look at it, and I think that it would take getting together with Kimberly Davis.
Yep.
Like Dean suggested, that this is, a matter that's open for
Yeah.
discussion. We should look at all the angles on that. We can come up with an answer.
Just trying to save the city money, try to keep city employees employed.
Thank you. Thank you,
Cool.
Ms. Rosenberg.
thanks,
Chris.
Folks, appreciate it.
Any other items? No other public speakers here? We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second by Councilor Kelly, roll call.
Councilor Barbell,
Yes.
Councilor Kelly,
Yeah.
Councilor Gibbs,
Yes.
Councilor Brody,
Yes.
Councilor McFarland,
Yeah.
Councilor Moore.
Yes.
Thank you, folks. Enjoy the great long weekend, Memorial Day weekend. It's gonna be great weather.
Time to plant.
Get together now.